It was just another ordinary afternoon for Emma, as she hurried into the local pharmacy, her mind preoccupied with the usual worries, work, bills, and the never-ending list of things she needed to do. She barely noticed the elderly man standing a few steps ahead of her in line, his wrinkled hands trembling slightly as he pulled a few crumpled bills from his wallet. The pharmacist behind the counter looked at him with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, sir," the pharmacist said gently. "Your total comes to $84. You're still short by $12. The old man hesitated, his eyes clouding with uncertainty. He turned his pockets inside out, revealing only a handful of loose coins. Emma watched as his shoulders slumped. Something about the way he sighed tugged at her heart. She didn't know his story, whether he had family, whether he had someone to help him. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Before she could even think twice, she stepped forward. "I've got it," she said, pulling out her card. The old man turned to her, his faded blue eyes widening in surprise. "You don't have to do that, dear," he said, his voice soft, but she could hear the weariness in it. "I want to," Emma insisted with a smile. "It's just $12. The man hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me." The transaction was over in seconds, but the warmth Emma felt lasted much longer. As the man took his prescription bag, he turned back to her. "Can I at least have your name?" he asked. She chuckled lightly. "Emma, just Emma." He gave her a long look, then nodded. "Thank you, Emma. I won't forget this." And with that, he shuffled out of the pharmacy, disappearing into the street. Emma didn't think much of it after that. It was just a small act of kindness, something anyone would have done. At least that's what she told herself. But 2 days later, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and for a moment, she debated whether to answer it. But some unexplainable instinct, told her to pick up. "Hello," she said cautiously. There was a pause, followed by a voice she didn't recognize. "Is this Emma?" "Yes." "Who's this?" "My name is Daniel," the man on the other end said. "I'm calling about Mr. Henderson, the man you helped at the pharmacy." Emma's breath caught slightly. She hadn't even known his name. "Is he okay?" she asked, suddenly feeling a strange wave of concern. Daniel hesitated. He wanted to reach out to you, but "There's something you need to know." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Something about the way he said it made her stomach twist. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. There was another pause before Daniel finally spoke again. "Mr. Henderson isn't just some ordinary old man. And the reason I'm calling you is because what you did for him that day has set something into motion, something that's about to change your life in ways you never could have imagined." Emma swallowed hard. She had no idea what he was talking about. But in that moment, she knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Emma's fingers tightened around her phone as she tried to make sense of what Daniel had just said. "Set something into motion," she repeated. "What do you mean?" Daniel let out a slow breath. "I know this sounds strange, but Mr. Henderson has been looking for someone like you. Someone genuine." Emma frowned. "Looking for someone like me. He didn't tell you who he was, did he?" Emma shook her head, even though Daniel couldn't see her. "No, I barely talked to him. He seemed like an ordinary man who needed a little help." A pause. Then Daniel said, "Mr. Henderson is not just an elderly man struggling to pay for his prescription. He's a very wealthy man, one of the richest in the state actually. But he's also very private. A few years ago, after some personal losses, he made a decision. He wanted to find someone who would do good without expecting anything in return. Someone who still believed in kindness. Emma blinked, trying to absorb what she was hearing. "What are you saying?" Daniel hesitated, then said, "He's been testing people in a way, seeing how they react in small moments. And you passed a test you didn't even know you were taking." Emma felt like the floor had shifted beneath her. "Are you telling me that helping him, paying $12, was some kind of secret test?" "In a way, yes," Daniel admitted. "But it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that you didn't hesitate. You didn't expect anything back, and that's exactly what he was looking for." Emma opened her mouth, then closed it. Her mind was spinning. "But why? What does he want from me?" Daniel's voice was steady. "He wants to meet you again, in person. There's something he needs to discuss with you." Emma's instincts told her this was insane. Who just went around secretly testing people's kindness? And for what purpose? But at the same time, something about the entire situation intrigued her. Mr. Henderson had seemed so fragile, so unassuming. What kind of man was he really? After a long pause, she found herself saying, "Where does he want to meet?" Daniel's answer came quickly. "His estate. Tomorrow evening. I'll send you the address." Emma hesitated, every logical part of her mind screaming that this was ridiculous. But another part, the part that had made her step forward in that pharmacy without thinking, told her to say yes. "All right," she said finally. "I'll be there." The next day felt impossibly long. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something far bigger than she understood. When she finally pulled up to the address Daniel had sent, her breath caught in her throat. The estate was massive, elegant but old, with ivy creeping up the stone walls. It looked like something out of a different era. As she stepped out of her car, a man in a dark suit approached. "Miss Emma," she nodded. "Right. This way, please." Her heart pounded as she followed him inside. The house was just as grand on the inside as it was outside, with tall ceilings, heavy wooden furniture, and paintings that looked expensive enough to be in a museum. And then, there he was. Mr. Henderson sat in a large chair near a fireplace, looking smaller than she remembered. But his eyes, those same faded blue eyes, studied her with quiet intensity. "You came," he said softly. Emma nodded, stepping closer. "I did." Mr. Henderson smiled faintly. "Good, because I have something very important to tell you." The air in the room felt thick with tension. Emma had no idea what was coming next, but she knew, without a doubt, that whatever it was about to change everything. Emma's heart pounded as she stood in front of Mr. Henderson, waiting for him to speak. The flickering light from the fireplace cast shadows across his face, making his expression unreadable. "You must be wondering why I brought you here," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. Emma nodded. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious." A small smile touched his lips. "Good. Curiosity is important, but so is character, and I believe you have both." Emma stayed quiet, letting him continue. "For years I've been searching," he said, his gaze distant. "Not for wealth, not for recognition, but for someone who understands the true meaning of kindness. Someone who gives without expecting anything in return." He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together. "I've spent my life building an empire. Companies, investments, properties. Things most people dream of. But in the end, none of it mattered. Not in the way I thought it would." Emma listened closely, feeling the weight of his words. "My wife passed away 10 years ago," he continued. "She was the best person I ever knew. She believed in helping people, in doing good without needing a reason. After she was gone, I realized how few people in this world actually live like that." He sighed, his eyes sad but thoughtful. "So I started looking, testing. I wanted to find someone who reminded me of her. And then, one day in a small pharmacy, I met you. Emma's chest tightened. But I only paid for your prescription. It was just $12. He shook his head. It wasn't about the money. It was about the instinct. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything. That's rare, Emma. She didn't know what to say. The idea that such a small action had led her here, to this moment, was overwhelming. Mr. Henderson took a deep breath. I don't have much time left. Emma's eyes widened. What? He gave her a knowing look. Doctors say I don't have long. A few months, maybe a year if I'm lucky. His voice was steady, but there was something vulnerable beneath it. I've made peace with it. But before I go, I want to make sure everything I've built, the wealth, the resources, goes to someone who will use it wisely. Someone who will carry on the values my wife believed in. Emma felt the air leave her lungs. Are you saying? He nodded. I want you to be that person, Emma. Her hand shook slightly. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. About anything, he said. I've met countless people in my lifetime. Businessmen, politicians, leaders. But none of them did what you did. None of them gave without expecting something back. Emma was speechless. She had come here expecting answers. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Of course, I'm not just handing everything over to you overnight, he continued. There are things to put in place, responsibilities to understand. But if you're willing, I want you to take what I've built and use it for good. Emma swallowed hard. I don't know if I'm the right person for this. I'm just normal. I don't know anything about running businesses or managing wealth. Mr. Henderson smiled. You'll learn, and you won't be alone. He gestured toward Daniel, who had been standing quietly in the background. Daniel will guide you. You'll have people to help. But the most important thing, the heart behind it all, that's something no one can teach. And you already have it. Emma's mind raced. A week ago, she had been living an ordinary life, worrying about rent and work deadlines. And now, she was being offered a future she never could have dreamed of. She looked at Mr. Henderson, at the kindness in his tired eyes. He wasn't just giving her money, he was trusting her with a legacy. After a long silence, she finally spoke. If you really believe I can do this, then I won't let you down. A look of pure relief crossed his face. That's all I needed to hear. In that moment, Emma understood that this wasn't just about wealth or opportunity. It was about something bigger, about proving that kindness, even in the smallest moments, had the power to change lives. And in ways she never expected, her own life had changed forever.